Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, January 26th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Vice President Kamala Harris founding a new LLC out of the state of California called Pioneer 49. Now, to prevent any confusion, the name comes from the name that the Secret Service assigned to her, Pioneer, and the number 49 isn't because of any type of presidential designation, but rather the vice presidential designation. She was the 49th Vice President of the United States. And so in founding this LLC, there have been a lot of questions as to, one, why Vice President Harris might make a decision like this. Why would Kamala Harris decide that just, days into the second Trump administration to go ahead and make a name for herself by putting herself back on the radar, establishing an LLC that was more than guaranteed to pick up media engagement and really speculate across the United States what exactly is the next step for the former vice president. Now, we've known for a while that Kamala Harris was not going to go, quote, quietly into the night. Those were her own words that she gave to the press when questioned right after the election loss. What is your next step? Are you going to run for president again? Are you going to run for governor of California? Are you going to go into the private sector? Are you going to end up moving into public policy in a different way? Will you run for Senate again? Will you move to the House of Representatives? All of these different things Vice President Harris, was being questioned about, and gave a very consistent answer. A combination of, I'll let you know what I decide to do, and that, yes, there's something in the future for me yet, but I don't know what it's going to be. And so Kamala Harris establishing this LLC, again, has fueled back that speculation that she's deciding very early on that she wants to do something next. She made it very clear very early on that she wants to keep her options open. Those who were closest to her, who were provided anonymity, or even those who have publicly spoken about the former vice president's ambitions, have all come to a conclusive answer that she wants to seek office. Whether that means the presidency again, whether that means the governorship, that's all up in the air, but clearly there are things for her to do. And so the New York Times actually had, and some of you guys pointed me in the direction of this article, it was published just days after the 2024 election, talking about, what's next for Kamala Harris. A lot of people were wondering, an election at which she was given 106 days to win, raising $1.5 billion. What exactly does somebody with that political capital decide to do with their life, right? She's 60 years old, young by presidential contender standpoint. And so looking at that perspective, the New York Times gave 6 options, 2 of which are obviously much more, prominent and much more possible than others. But let's go ahead and go through them. The first one, bide her time and run again in 2028. That's a very real possibility. We've talked extensively in the last video I made about Kamala Harris about either 2028 or 2026. Obviously, we'll come back and revisit this 2028 point later on in this video, but that seems to be the number one thing that the New York Times, at least, is insinuating that she would like to do. The next thing is to run for a lower office. Now, obviously, being governor, being senator is something that people talk about as very big accomplishments, especially from the nation's largest state. But nothing really comes above the vice presidency than the presidency. And so in many ways, it would be seen as a step down for Kamala Harris. For me, I would say it's more of a, linear movement, given that California represents roughly 1/8 of the entire nation. If you're governor there, you're practically president of a middle-sized country. But still, again, looking at it here, it's designated as running for lower office. Maybe she'll run for Senate. Maybe she'll run for governor. Those things are up in the air. The next thing is to join the private sector. Now, I really think this is something that doesn't make much sense given Kamala Harris's track record. I mean, even in its name, and they mention it here, for the people, never really was something that she had been, campaigning on in the past or even talked about, right? It's very different when you have people like Mitt Romney, co-founder of Bain Capital, right? He would more than likely go back into the private sector if he didn't have ambitions to run for Senate and a state that was willing to elect him, right? Usually that happens for presidential contenders who do not have much left to run for, right? Where maybe their governorship has been taken up or their Senate seat has been taken up and there is no clear mandate for them to return to their home state and run. This time around, it doesn't seem like that's the likeliest case. Kamala Harris is in a pretty strong position electorally to run for governor in California and to hold that level of political power. So joining the private sector seems a lot less likely for her to do, especially now that she's giving this early indication that she wants to do something next. So I'd move past that and say, doesn't really sound like her. Do advocacy work or join a think tank. Obviously, right, something that people talk about, again, in the same vein as private sector, it's not the same exact thing, right? You can still do public service. I also just do not think that's in the line for the vice president. Writing a book, I don't think this is something that will be necessary. It could be a great way to raise money and make money for a future bid, whatever that might be. but I don't think that's exactly where we're headed. There might be a Kamala Harris book that's reflective on the election. All in all, though, again, that's going to take some time to write, take some time to talk about, and that isn't really, the only thing that people decide to do once they decide not to run. In the practice, the final thing here, they would say practice self-care, go for a hike. Obviously very reminiscent of what Hillary Clinton did back in 2016, going on hikes, going around New York, all these different things. That does not seem to be the case for Kamala Harris. It does not seem that she is at her end of her political career. And so, again, in keeping her options open by deciding to establish this organization, it's being founded here on the purpose that will help her decide her next steps. I am not convinced that the vice president believes that, or the former vice president believes that she will be, not running for re-election, or not re-election, not running in 2028, or running for governor, all these different things. I don't think that decision has been made up. What I think this is here to do is to allow her to build out the infrastructure, to build out her personal office, to raise money, to make money, all of these different things that could help her make some next steps and decide, okay, what is the likeliest outcome for me? And so, as we talked about in the last video, talking about Kamala Harris, it's very interesting that Kamala Harris is deciding to do something very similar to what Obama did. Obama created an organization called Renegade 44. Renegade was the name that he was called by the Secret Service. 44 is the number at which Obama was president, the 44th president of the United States. Again, pioneer, 49. So it's sort of in that description box here. And I will say, right, deciding that she's going to go ahead and run for office, it isn't necessarily guaranteed with this founding of the LLC, right? If you remember back in 2017, Hillary Clinton launched Onward Together. It was a huge organization that raised money and funded candidates in battleground states and focused a lot on the 2018 midterm elections. That was a big deal, right? The Onward Together movement was Hillary Clinton's project post-election. And so many people saw that as maybe she's running in 2020. She's going to build out this argument that voters should be, remorseful, that she's someone who should have been elected and that Trump was so bad that they'd rather have Hillary back than somebody else. No. Didn't end up happening. Hillary Clinton had no intention and gave no indication that she was going to run for president again. Onward Together was a political action committee with the entire focus of electing Democrats, working with organizations, run for something, color of change, swing left, most notably, right? All of these different groups that ended up being and still continue to be mainstream Democratic organizations that raise millions upon millions of dollars, that fund candidate after candidate after candidate, made a big impact on, even though Kamala Harris lost the election, why some of these margins were closer than what they would have been under Biden, closer when they would have been without their support and investments. And so just looking at large here, I don't think that founding Pioneer 49 inherently means she's guaranteed to run, but I will say, it is a sign typically one takes if they are deciding to keep their options open. I don't think it was the case with Hillary Clinton, but this was a more unique circumstance. Donald Trump, most recently in 2020, immediately we knew that he was considering running for re-election. He made that almost very, very clear. And so in those early stages, right, well, though he had not announced his second presidential bid, or third presidential bid rather, we were in a position where we were watching Trump from the sidelines. We were covering this. You can find it on the channel, talking about, okay, what is Trump doing? Right? This is June of 2022. He announced November 14th, 2022. Trump moved $1 million from his political groups to his private business after losing the election. Okay, so this is a conversation. Is he going back to business? Is he going back to political, involvement? He was already doing rallies at this point for different candidates across a number of red states. And so we were looking at this. Okay, Donald Trump was giving us something. He was giving us some indication that he was going to run. Things started to get closer. He founded the Save America PAC, which was Donald Trump's, way of getting back into holding rallies, into fundraising money, all of these different things, right? Donald Trump was in that weird limbo where he didn't want to announce he's running for re-election because it would have hurt Republicans in the midterm elections, all of these different things. What happened? He ended up doing all these early steps, very similar to Hillary Clinton, it seemed, and then he announced a bid. And so I think something similar could be happening with Kamala Harris, where I think we could be seeing some of the early stages of a potential 2028 bid. I mean, I don't think it's lost on her that in the immediate aftermath of the 2024 election, and again, these polls are so incredibly early, I never put much stock into them, but when candidates are considering, what are my next steps? What do I, or what should I decide to do? They often look at the only data available. And sooner or later, we're going to start seeing Kamala Harris aligned PACs. Even if she isn't running herself, you saw in 2007, The, Ready for Hillary PAC emerged. They wanted her to run in 2008. Well, she did, but it wasn't directly her. Obviously, those close to her and people who were heavily pushing for her. But we just saw, a group founded for Pete Buttigieg. All In for Pete was just announced, even though Pete Buttigieg right now is doing a semester at UChicago, all these different things, right? There's no guarantee that he's going to run for president of the United States, but you're already getting those political action groups founding to push Pete Buttigieg to run. And so again, if Kamala Harris is sitting with her advisors and she's saying, show me the data, show me what we're looking at right now, what do they find? That of all of the recent polls taken post-election, and it's not many, but it's 4 different major sites, Emerson College, which ended up being one of the most accurate ones this cycle, McLaughlin and Associates, Echelon Insights, and Morning Consult, all, again, reputable pollsters. She leads every single poll, and it isn't even close, right? It's not particularly close. The next person coming up to her is her 35% to Pete Buttigieg's 12%. And then it's a huge drop-off. Gavin Newsom, 7. Josh Shapiro, 5. Tim Walz, 5. The clear frontrunner right now, and again, for better or for worse for the Democratic Party, that is going to be up to them and for the election to decide. Kamala Harris is in this position. So it's really interesting, though, because I think that's also why she's keeping her options open there. It also makes sense that she's keeping her options open for the California governor's race. When you take a look at what's happening right now, though we don't have many substantive polls being taken in the state of California, the last one we saw with Harris being mentioned on the name here actually was right around the aftermath of the election. We haven't seen any more recent ones, but again, should she substantively put her name in, like saying, I'm going to do all these different hits, these media, relations going to LA, San Francisco, etc., which she very well might, we see here that there is no clear frontrunner in the California's governor's race. Katie Porter, Steve Garvey, at most, are performing the best out of all of the candidates here. And what does it say? 21 to 18, meaning that there are a number of people out there who are opening up to the idea of electing somebody else. And also, too, very often, when very strong contenders enter into crowded primaries, people drop out and coalesce around a certain candidate. Wouldn't you rather be the one who is associated with the winning candidate rather than someone who ran against them and got 1% of the vote? And given the way the systems work in the state of California, it's very possible that these candidates will end up dropping out, endorsing Harris because they're afraid of splitting the vote and benefiting, other candidates. Because we're talking about here a top 2 primary system where maybe if the vote splits too much across the state, you could be seeing the Republicans ending up in a position where maybe they'll get the top 2 spots. Obviously, not the likeliest outcome. Democrats are more than guaranteed to get a spot, but I can guarantee you, should Kamala Harris enter into the California governor's race, she will be in a strong position. And so I think I was in a bit of a position where I was waiting to see if Harris was to run, what her personal office would move next to do, what her involvement with the DNC and the chair election and all of these different national Democrats would look like if she was to decide to run for something in the future. And this was a really big sign that, hey, she's scheming for something. And I say that truly looking at it from a very objective political standpoint. This is the sign of someone who wants to run again. I don't see this in the same vein that I saw Onward Together, which had a clear, fleshed out purpose that was co-founded with Howard Dean, another failed presidential candidate. I mean, this is not the same thing. This is Kamala Harris, who's now going to grocery stores and talking to the press there, visiting firefighters in Los Angeles, reactivating her social media accounts after 2 months of dormancy post-election. Those are the signs of a candidate who wants to do something in the future. Age is not a limit on her. A range of possibility is not a limit on Kamala Harris. She might not be the next president of the United States. She may never be the president of the United States. But she still is in a position right now where the options are open. She may never be the California governor, but the option is open. And again, that's what this LLC seems to have been founded with the sole purpose of doing. For someone, maybe somebody else, who would have indicated otherwise that they were done with politics, that they were going to write a book, they were going to lead their party from, the mainstream media, all these different things, right? That would be a great deal. I'm sure Kamala Harris would make millions if she could land a TV deal with CNN or MSNBC. But that's clearly not where she wants to go. And as she reiterated multiple times to the press, she's not going to go quietly into the light. Now, we will talk, if she decides to run for either office, what the electoral repercussions might look like nationally and locally. Can she win in California? More likely than not. Can she win nationally? I don't know. That's the question. She didn't win the last time, so now there's going to be questions raised about electability and viability moving forward. All of these different things will things that will be discussed once we get more indications. But right now, this Pioneer 49 LLC is raising more questions than, answering them. And I think that's going to be a big part of all this media speculation and conversation around what the former vice president is going to do, because it is clear she founded this PAC with this LLC with intention, and it very well could help her in any type of future bid, dependent on what she wants to do. So we'll be closely watching. Kamala Harris will be closely watching what Pioneer 49 decides to do and what many other Democratic candidates also, plan to do. The 2026 midterms are far closer than the 2028 elections. And if she's running for governor, she needs to announce it sometime soon, because as of right now, Kamala Harris providing this big signal is still a big question mark, although one that leans towards the direction of running for something rather than not. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 post-election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.